Three Compositions for Solo Piano is an early 1947 work by Milton Babbitt. We are about to hear an excerpt from the first of three pieces in the set. Listen to the opening 8 measures as if there were a quiz afterwards. What feature of the music caught your ear? Was it in some way outstanding or memorable? Considering it is a solo piano work, perhaps there is something you notice in the interplay of hands. If someone asked you, how does it go? What characteristic aspect of music could you render that others could also recognize? Even though melodic contour is well defined and consistent in point within each motivic segment, singing the motive back is complicated not only by growing registral spans, but by the overall zigzagging nature of the line. Typically, first-time listeners respond by rhythmically declaring the characteristic syncopated motive heard in the opening measures. A set of isochronous fast notes forms a group that terminates on a long note or a rest, thereafter changing the direction of the line to compensate for long melodic stretches or leaps, a practice familiar to any student of modal counterpoint. The motive comprises 4 distinct pauses that arrest the momentum of isochronous sixteenths. When accounting for the number of sound attacks between each hiatus, the characteristic motive outlines an attack set 5-1-4-2 over the span of 2 notated bars. This rhythmic figure demonstrates an early effort by Babbitt to apply serial procedures to non-pitched parameters, particularly the rhythm. As first heard, the prime form of the motive operates in mod 6 space, corresponding to a pitch hexachord that also unfolds in each measure. Rhythmic inversion of the attack set 5-1-4-2 thus corresponds to a mod 6 complement 1-5-2-4, since 1 plus 5 equals 6 and 2 plus 4 equals 6. Retrograde form of the attack set simply reverses the order of elements in the prime form, as shown with arrows, whereas the retrograde inversion inverts the retrograde in mod 6. These 4 forms of rhythmic attack set correlate with 4 serial operations we customarily denote with prime, inversion, retrograde, or retrograde inversion. If you noted unusual level of dynamic stratification between the hands, you heard a level of correspondence among musical parameters shown here. 4 different forms of the rhythmic attack set correlate with 4 different dynamic levels. The softest piano dynamic always corresponding to a retrograde and the loudest forte to an inversion. Each 2-bar unit of the notated score is coded in a different but parameter synchronized combination. Repetition of a 2-bar attack set plus dynamic segment always occurs in a different hand or pulse stream. The 4 dynamic levels also map onto the work's pitch structure based on an all-combinatorial hexachord 023-457. Applying one of 4 serial procedures to the hexachord itself produces the complementary hexachord, thus completing a 12-tone aggregate every 2 measures in each hand. The work's polyphonic setting allows for 2-part counterpoint in which 2 hexachords of chosen row forms complete an aggregate once in each measure, followed by the lines in the hands swapping pitches of their constituent hexachords, reminiscent of invertible counterpoint. Hexachordal combinatoriality, as demonstrated here, results in the right hand repeating pitches first heard in the left hand. Serial pitch organization with 4 distinct versions of a series systematically corresponds to the 4 dynamic levels and 4 forms of the rhythmic attack set. That means that each time we hear motive forte, we are also hearing a form of the pitch series that inverts the opening measures and a rhythmic form that characteristically begins with a single attack followed by the longest group of 5. Hexachord 6-8 or 0-2-3-4-5-7 is one of 5 6-note collections that can generate its complement, a different 6-note set completing the chromatic aggregate, through transposition, inversion, retrograde, and retrograde inversion. This hexachord lacks a tritone as seen on the interval class vector and corresponds to a split third diatonic 6-note collection. Babbitt employs P4 and P10, transpositionally combinatorial, and related by 6 semitones, but he still avoids sounding harmonic tritones. He uses tritones to mark aggregate boundaries, as will be shown on the next slide. Note that row forms relate to each other by serial operations, not only in reference to the P form. Thus, R and RI relate to each other by inversion. They are inversionally combinatorial, even though they represent retrograde operations in relation to the P form. The right-hand column, displaying harmonic intervals between synchronized row forms, shows other unique intervallic possibilities, including the symmetrical intervallic structure in R and RI forms. Combinatorial properties Babbitt does favor in this work include prominent recursion of pitch class diodes, which, as seen on the right-hand side of the slide, includes aggregate boundary tritones and a pitch swap between two central diodes outlining a tritone. And as seen on the left-hand slide, in the opening two bars related by T6, in lieu of potential harmonic tritones, we hear prominently sounding major third C2, E3 on beat 2. Also notable are sequential melodic thirds and scalar and arpeggio fragments traversing a diatonic, although more jazzy space. As a side note, in his youth, Babbitt was a consummate club performer. In the late 50s, he even contributed to a third stream album featuring works fusing classical and jazz music. A complete formal overview of the composition shows head solo head construction, a somewhat palindromic jazz standard resonating with other palindromic structures the composer embeds into the solo. Based on row structure distribution, the 8-bar head establishes a 2-bar stride. First form of variation on line 2 includes repeated row forms and the overall faster rate at which pitch series unfold. Babbitt also introduces whole bar gaps, graph black, that mark motivic boundaries. The central segment of the solo adds 3-row palindromes and denser syncopation, with pulse stream entries now half a measure apart. The eventual return of the opening 8 measures repeats a larger sequence of row forms in near retrograde. Left-hand sequence is now transferred to the right hand with new row counterpoint. This work is not only a unique example of a third stream jazz solo, it is also unique in its approach to total or integral serialism, a term that applies to post-World War II practice correlating series in multiple musical parameters, and frequently starting with pitch and rhythm. As post-war serialism considered the non-pitch parameters more systematically, the practice became associated with 12-tone serialism, but it does not have to be. Other musical works that aim for total serialism often exceed cognitive parameters of the listener's perception apparatus, such as assigning different volume or duration to notes corresponding to each of the 12 pitches of the dodecaphonic series. The result is 12 different dynamic markings and 12 different note values. In contrast, Babbitt draws attention to 4 rather than 12 elements of distinction. Particularly in non-pitch domains, this renders it perceptually accessible.